Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining. And after a long time, we again have a live session on Instagram. And today we're going to invite our tutors from Reactive Miniverse Studio Workshop, which is going to start in about 2 weeks. And we will have Andrew and Hamza, the tutors of this studio workshop, joining today with us, and we will be discussing about their careers and their architecture, what are they doing, and also about the workshop. So I'll just give a very short introduction about each one of them, and then I will invite them to the stage to join here with me. So first of all, Andrew Friedenberg is an American architect and computational designer who is working at Heatherwick Studio. He received his bachelor's degree in architecture from AADRL, and he has worked on projects ranging from material research to urban design. And also Hamze Machmouchi is an architectural designer and researcher at Zaha Hadid Architects, who graduated from the Architectural Association, AADRL. He previously earned his bachelor's degree in architecture from Magna Cum Laude in Boston. During his time at the AA, he created a metaverse in which various real-life stakeholders may use assets that can be traded in a marketplace to form a whole neighborhood. Before starting this episode, I wanted to talk about PAACADEMY, which is an architectural educational platform powered by parametric architecture to spread the idea of using parametric design and computational tools in architecture. PAACADEMY has broadened its work experience and collaboration with pioneering architects and designers dealing with diverse and numerous topics of computational design and digital fabrication. Thanks for joining, guys. I know you both are in London, and this probably at the same distance or same location. And today we're gonna discuss about your backgrounds, the projects that you're working on, and also we're gonna discuss the studio workshops that we're gonna have together, and you're gonna lead this studio. So I'm gonna start by asking both of you, maybe Andrew can go first. Why were you interested in becoming an architect, and how does it evolve since then?
Well, that's a very broad question. I must say, I've always been, my family is not a family of designers, hardly so, completely actually the opposite. But I just enjoyed playing Legos when I was a kid, drawing. I took drawing camps. My parents encouraged, some level of design, so I'd go to drawing camps. We did some like computer graphics camps and things like that. But I had a very traditional sense of what architecture was, and so I went and got my undergraduate in the University of Oregon in Oregon in the west coast of the United States, and it was a very like holistic approach to architecture. And sort of since then, it's gone off the rails, right? It's devolved into a whole series of other interests, including what we're doing with this course and whatnot. But it comes from a background of like sustainability and architecture and like real spatial design and this sort of thing. So yeah, I mean that's kind of how I started to enjoy architecture and whatnot.
Nice. How do you think it has changed since you were interested to join architecture, or the ideas, the things that you were expecting now? How did it has evolved since then?
So I got my bachelor's of architecture, and I went and I worked in real architecture practices, doing real buildings and real things. And this is a really good experience. I think it's like kind of fundamental, to the later development of anything after that.
I like the way you emphasize on a real thing.
I think it is very important to design real things, I think it can be, you can easily get lost if you're designing non-tangible things. I think it's important to have something physical, and not to get lost in either one. It's trying to bring it all together. yeah, but so this experience, like working in an actual architecture, like real architecture, it kind of led me to kind of question some of the fundamental decisions that were being made, and this in turn sort of led me towards the computational side of architecture, of using like math and logic and processes to make designing so in a way simpler, but in a way like unlock your toolbox so you can design anything. And so that is what led me to then go to the AA and coming to London for the first time. And after that, I mean, I worked three jobs actually since I graduated AA. One being with Mark Bourne's The Very Mini, which is very computational sculptures. You'll see some of their work definitely posted on your page. That's The Very Mini. And so this is a really interesting experience, like combining arts and architecture, focusing on the computational side of it. And then I've also worked material research with Logitech and doing some more exploratory like personal researches on the side as well. And so this kind of like all this has like accumulated my interest in things beyond
Nice.
just architecture as well. So yeah.
That's great. So what about you, Hamza?
So it's a bit the opposite actually for me. Like my parents were so in the construction industry. My sister is actually an interior architect and on her way to become an architect. And when I was a child, actually, it was kind of rebellious of me, but I really wanted to be a robotics engineer. Like I was super fascinated with Isaac Asimov, like all of these different like movies I was watching, like iRobot. And for me, like it just started really like diverging to like the realm of like domotics, like really thinking about like, like augmented architecture, and I was thinking about how, like architecture could become reactive. And yeah, somehow I just found myself like becoming interested actually in architecture, but more as I was going into the site with my parents to like look at construction projects and stuff like this. And then all of a sudden, yeah, like I applied to go to Boston just to test out how architecture was for me. And I just really, so I went to the Boston Architecture College, and the college itself is like very interesting because it's embedded in practice. So you have to go to work while you're going to school. So one thing that was really cool was to see how architecture in practice is kind of like very different from the way we think about it academically, and how research started like really spawning from there. Like you're taking things from reality and trying to put them into like so you're taking actually things from the imaginary realm and you're trying to implement them into reality. And it became really interesting for me as I was going through my studies, how like the relationship of robotics could be something that could be implemented in real life, and how like architecture could actually take in from these like moments. And this is somehow how I actually kind of got really super interested in the realm of metaverse, right? Because this is where you get to test out ideas. And a lot of the things that I was doing at the DRL were actually revolving around like with my team, like we were trying to think about how we could augment, architecture, maybe just from the way we interact with one another. Like it became something really, holistic in a way, because you started thinking like architecture is just not this one simple like linear process. It's something that involves many different aspects, and you can incorporate all of these different things together. You could think that robotics is very remote from, like, for example, like how we design architecture. But I mean, you could look at many projects that are being done today, and a lot of the things that are being kinetic or the things that are being considered like imaginary are being built today, like in a sense, through architecture. And yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, the short story on how I kind of went where I'm at now.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned about AADRL, and I know both of you have been there. What do you think is very unique about AA that is just keeping it on the forefront of architecture school? And most people that graduate from AA, they also go to GHA and top studios like Heatherwick. What is special about DRL?
I think it comes from they're really I mean, so they're pushing a technology side and really trying to grasp onto new technologies and seeing how you can augment them. But at the same time, they're also trying to push some social agenda, which is very hard to integrate into architecture because it's asking greater questions about society and community forming and these sort of things. But it's bringing that into the conversation, which I think is important. So it allows us to sort of take these variety of things and develop our own researches. So you have, you know, a studio of 4 groups or 16 maybe in the entire DRL. And you're able to kind of push a whole lot of agendas forward at each year, and then consecutive years will further that development. So it's super interesting. I went to the DRL the year before Hamze, and we also were looking at some sort of community building architecture using the game engines essentially to pre-design a building before it ever gets even to the design stage. So yeah, so it's still fundamentally locked in reality. It's like we want to output a building, but we're using game engines and these ideas of social interaction in a metaverse sort of style platform to build that building. So we want to fundamentally change society with a built thing, but we're using these augmented technologies to get there. So I think there's like a really nice duality in that maybe I can't speak for other schools, right? I'm sure other schools do this as well and whatnot, but that definitely was my experience in the DRL.
Right.
I think actually what's quite unique about the DRL is it's unapologetic about its disruptive agenda. Like it's always trying to like shake kind of things. You know, it's always trying to force you to think in a different fashion, and there's no field that's too remote. Like for example, even like when you look at different studios inside of the program itself, you start noticing people like tackling with biology, or like some people are even doing some sort of like reaction like with robotics, or even like thinking about how fabrication can be interlinked with the way we develop prototypes. Like there's absolutely no kind of, and because of its community, there's absolutely no boundary. Like you could build, for example, my year we built like one of the tallest 3D printed columns, and we just had never printed something ever before. And it was just like, oh yeah, we can. And yeah, they were like, yeah, no problem. Go ahead, use the robot and go ahead, like try it and see if it happens. And sometimes it would fail, sometimes it would work. And I think that's what's great about the school in general, is that it actually really promotes cross, like boundaryless kind of like experimentation. There's no you're forced to think outside of the box, and I think that's what's great about it in general. Yeah, that was my experience at least.
And
amazing.
One thing just to add to that is Hamze mentioned that there was a lot of failure. Is that when with the research we were doing, there was a lot of failure, and there's a lot of dead ends that you end at. And I think there's like a level of acceptance that comes from that. That's okay with a bit of failure, you know.
That's great. Failures are a part of success as well. Like many steps of failures, but at the end you can call it success. So we discussed somehow about game engines and their integration to our industry, and also there's the metaverse that we are quietly recently hearing it in all industries, and it's mostly very attached to architects, because architects have learned how to work on virtual environments and then bring them into the real environment. But now we are just focused on the virtual environments. How do you think is this metaverse is also integrating in our profession?
I think there would be two groups actually in this sort of approach, because there's the first approach, which is like the digital twin, right? You're trying to kind of replicate what happens in real life. And this is part of what my thesis tackled, which was like, you take a site that exists already and you're creating a sort of digital version of it that exists in the digital realm, and where people can also have their currency already applied there. And you have like these stakeholders that can start interacting with one another. And that also kind of relates, you know, to like how, for example, projects like Liberland kind of approach it, right? Like having this sort of cyber physical platform where people just like engage and kind of exchange goods before they get implemented inside. So this is in this sense like something that's like for practical purposes, we call it like an experimentation platform, like where you actually test things before they get built. And then on the other hand, you have, in my opinion, the second group, which is the one that's solely focused on narratives. And this is the thing that kind of like revolve around NFTs, social contracts, and how you actually like develop spaces that are meant to only be explored in the digital realm and that can never be built in real life, and that's okay, right? Like, and I think that's kind of like the bigger challenge that we're trying to prone to like the students and whoever's going to be watching in the future is, throughout the studio, what would you make as a space that solely focuses on narratives? Because that also has its constraints based on how you take that start and end point, like how you reach these two ends and how you actually have space react to you and all of these things. We're just trying to kind of propose a dialogue regarding how things are built in that sort of digital realm, you know? I don't know, Andrew, if you want to add to that.
Well, like, yeah, I mean, it kind of fundamentally questions like what is the metaverse, which is already a ridiculously hard question to answer. I don't know if I buy into this idea that seems to be floating around more recently, where it's like this all immersive way of life. I don't believe that. I believe it's like it's more just a way that in the future probably more experiences will be augmented digitally, and there will be a more opportunity to experience education and culture and games like in a more immersive fashion. And this is sort of where I see architects lending themselves to. It would be a pity to like if architects only were to design, for example, like what a physical store would manifest itself in the metaverse for a company and whatnot, when it kind of takes the realm of possibilities and opens the whole bag. So you can do whatever. So what we're really hoping to do is we can question what exactly spatial experiences in these sort of digital environments can be. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I think actually one other thing. Sorry. So one other thing that I'd like to add is it would force people to kind of like think about spaces that speak for themselves, right? Like this is the only occasion where we have the architecture that could actually react to people, right? Like this is the sense kind of like we're trying to implement, where people don't have to just like walk around from one space to the other. The space could actually also guide them and transport them and even provide enhanced narratives as you're like, you know, walking through or, you know, merging or becoming part of the space, you know?
Of course, the spaces in metaverse or digital spaces are as much as valuable than physical worlds, because we try to somehow relate ourselves into spaces. If it's something that is out of understanding, we're not going to enjoy that, and that's also a very important part of designing for metaverse. That it is also important to design by architects and the designers, not just designers from other industries like developers, or let's say police developers. So what kind of tools are you mostly focused on, guys? Like the projects that you work, even in metaverse or in physical worlds, what kind of tools you are mostly focused on?
Okay, so in terms of like actual software, if we're limiting ourselves to software, I would say I'm definitely a Rhino Grasshopper guy.
Okay.
I've been using this software for quite some time. Of course, I use a million other softwares in my free time. I spend a lot of my time using Unreal Engine and this sort of things just to make it more immersive, because Rhino Grasshopper, you're limited in your experiential grasp on that. But yeah, I love sort of open source software. So Blender is another one that I really enjoy. You can get really high quality product from that quite quickly and seamlessly. So yeah, I would say those are probably my main three. I've dabbled with Houdini a little bit. That's a hard one to grasp, but it's a fantastic software. So and also Maya, but that was more DRL times. Now I haven't used Maya for quite some time. So there's a lot of software, and it definitely gets overwhelming all the time, you know. And everyone's saying each specific software is the future of the industry and whatnot. So I think it's just important to kind of have a general grasp on what they can do, and you can figure out the rest with tutorials as need be, you know?
That's great.
Yeah, there's no software that can do it all. Like, I think on my end, like the ones that I mostly use, like in my professional, like day to day, it's like Rhino, Maya, Unreal Engine is mostly like things that I use, when I'm trying to like create platforms, and especially like what's cool about Unreal is that, especially with the new update, is that you're able to create different like platforms that can immediately be exported, and even maybe like soon enough, like have the ability to even like export them to the internet. I think this is kind of like the premise of why Unreal Engine is so essential. Is like the game industry is slowly merging with all these different industries. Already merged, for example, with the film industry. Like if you guys watch The Mandalorian or Obi-Wan, like these are all shot using Unreal Engine technology, and they're just using this like geodesic room, like with the screens around, and all these scenes look like they're even shot at on site somewhere, but they're all like Unreal, they don't exist.
There's an amazing video on YouTube documenting that process. Somewhere in there, you just type in Mandalorian Unreal Engine. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
That's great. So talking about Metaverse, Unreal Engine, and we wanted to somehow to combine these terms and use your experience to teach our students as well. In about 2 weeks from now, you're going to lead a studio workshop at PAACADEMY, and the topic is Reactive Miniverse. Can you talk a little bit about this studio workshop and what kind of knowledge students will be taking away from this workshop?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it's going to be combining sort of our architectural knowledge. We're both architects at the end of the day, with sort of what we would enjoy seeing in what we were saying as miniverses, and this will be represented in Unreal Engine. So what we're going to be focusing on is like creating spaces and geometries in Rhino and Grasshopper, and then using Unreal Engine to make them dynamic and reactive to players. So as you approach something, there can be an effect, a change. There can be transformations, buttons and triggers that can actually change the environment. So this is what we're really trying to focus on. So it's blending like a very architectural tool, Rhino, Grasshopper, and then also blending it into the very game engine and experiential tool of Unreal.
That's
and
correct.
I think also what's important to note also is we call it Miniverse because the reality is we can't possibly build an entire like an entire metaverse in this time. Like we're trying to kind of like tone it down to a sort of level or a sort of scene where students can actually explore how space can speak for itself. Again, like how can people like actually augment architecture like capabilities. Like what for example, what is a door in the in the metaverse, right? Like why does a door have to be a door in the metaverse? Does it only open, close? Does it have other properties that people can actually exploit, right? That are just further than just the usual things that you experience in real life. And why are they so different to us in the digital realm? Like why would they be so exciting? And is there a way to kind of like create and promote this culture of making space that speak for themselves first, but also like give also something to think about, right? Because this is how like music, film industry operate. Like they kind of give you a sort of cultural fundamental that you kind of keep in your own kind of like baggage as you move forward. And this is kind of like how we're seeing it, in general.
Yeah, like in the architectural world, there's centuries and centuries of knowledge and documentation of like the limitations of structural things and spatial ways. Like think of Maison Domino. Like this is how concrete will be able to define space. But in what we're calling our miniverse, those same preconceptions and laws don't necessarily exist. So maybe what we could explore is what are that basis, like what can a space be like, and how will this affect you? How will you be able to occupy the space and whatnot?
That's great. So this studio workshop will start in about 2 weeks. So for those of you guys are interested to check it out, please go to our Instagram page and click on the link in bio. and you'll find all the information. There are a couple of seats left in case you're interested. Just book your spot, and we'll just see. Would be very happy to seeing you there. So talking about the metaverse, and I'm sure that this term is going to be evolved in the future. As we go, we will be knowing much more things about metaverse and virtual spaces. And regarding that, you are both working in some pioneering architectural offices. How do you see the future of metaverse in terms of we're still on the very early stages? How do you see the future regarding that? And I'm sure your companies are somehow also involved with the design of these spaces. Maybe you are also working. Maybe it's classified, but how do you see the future of it?
You know, Hamid, there's something that I always kind of think about when I see these new kind of like you know, like paradigm shifts, we call them, right? Like when they come in front of us, I always think of Marshall McLuhan. You know, like he wrote a book called The Medium is the Message. It was called the Massage, which he liked that title because massaging the brain. But what he said, like that sentence, always kind of like, you know, resonates with me because we always get fascinated about what the tool, like by the tool itself, when we don't really care about what the tool can do for us,
yes.
right? Like we sometimes just talk about like just the tool itself. Oh, look, this is the tool. And I think we kind of forget that that tool has other meaning and like ends like that are really interesting. That also deserve to kind of be explored a lot more. And I think in the near future, what's going to happen, I mean, especially with like how Meta is kind of like, you know, slowly taking over like a lot of like, you know, game industry giants. Like for example, Creator is something mundane. Like it's like the Roblox of like Unreal Engine. Like this, for example, was recently acquired by Meta. Well, the licenses you can now play simply on Facebook, and it's just something that allows you to just build your own game and making it just really truly democratic. And I think what the metaverse will do, in a sense, is kind of what I think in a way what Meta is kind of aspiring to do is democratizing or making it very accessible for people to show their design first and also create discourse that goes beyond just what architecture is physically, right? So I think in the near future, what would happen in a sense is this ability to kind of question the physicality of architecture and maybe even talk about novel ideas that sometimes would exist only in the metaverse, but also sometimes be transferred into real life. And yeah, that's, I think, my take on it.
Okay. And did you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, I won't say anything about the Heatherwick side of it, but I do know a bit about, so there's this really fabulous stadium they built in LA, which I'm blanking on the name. I think it was HOK designed it. It's this beautiful stadium, SoFi Stadium. And it was, I think, the first building in the United States that got its planning permission and construction documents all signed off, not as physical pieces of paper, but as an occupiable 3D model, which is super fascinating to think about, rather than outputting a design into stacks of pieces of paper and then submitting it to get it built. It's actually now you can send a file that a city council member or a resident might be able to actually interact with prior to the approval. I mean, it potentially could get rid of the whole like render to reality problem that we see, right?
Yes.
So I think there's like a lot of opportunities that are not that like put on the VR and disappear into the metaverse, you know, that. So I think there's a lot of like real world, very applicable things, especially in the workplace, like how our workplaces are evolving faster than I think anyone can get used to. I think Zoom is super two-dimensional, and I think there's a lot of room for slightly augmentation in our workplaces and whatnot. Yeah,
that's absolutely right.
Maximizing. I think like maximizing stakeholder participation, like it reminds me a bit of that University of Oregon experiment that Christopher Alexander did, right? Like how you had like people vote back then, like there was a lack of incentive for people to even engage with projects in architecture. Maybe in the near future, you'll be able to even have everyone getting involved, and having their say on how a project gets built,
Can you
That's
imagine the
absolutely right.
repercussions of this?
I think the digital twin of the project, or let's say the physical, the virtual model of the project is going to be much more as valuable as the physical building itself. And in case of reconstruction or restoration, or what are they going to do about the building after its life, and the recycling or reusing these materials are also going to be calculated and planned according to the 3D file, or let's say virtual file of the building. And in terms of sharing with the customers and involving, and it's going to be in another stage probably that we are living in now. It's just purchasing all the houses or flats or renting them regarding the 2D images. And that's definitely something that is going to be game changing. In case any of our audience who are interested to join the Reactive Miniverse workshop, just slide into our profile and click on the link in bio. There are a couple of seats left, and just book your spot and be with us at the Reactive Miniverse Studio workshop starting on 25th June. Okay, guys, thank you so much for this amazing discussion. Just lastly, I wanted to ask, what are your advices for students and younger professionals? You guys are also young architects and designers.
Come on.
I think this is something that I always say
with the students.
That's something that I always say to my students, and I repeatedly say like all the time when I have the opportunities, like to stay curious. I think staying curious and always kind of really question things, be critical of things that are around you, because the thing as an architect, you're also a social vessel, right? Yeah, like you're kind of transferring different fields into all, like they're all converging into one, right? Like you're taking on cultural aspects, physical aspects, aesthetic aspects, like you're almost, like you're at this intersection of different disciplines, and your role is to always stay curious and always be open to novel ideas,
Yeah,
that's I think my advice.
And I think going off that is, don't have, okay, maybe that's bad advice, but I went into it with no set prior plan of what I was going to do. I was very dynamic and flexible in what I was going to do. I pursue an interest, for a period of time, and then I acquire a new interest, or I see how the industry is changing, and I move with that. And I think that leads to a very interesting background, and it can take you quite far. But don't just have a goal of where exactly you want to be, because in 10 years when you're potentially at that goal, I'm not necessarily sure it'll be there or the same as you imagined it would be,
Exactly. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate your time, and hope to see you soon in 25th of June.
All right, we're
excited. Thanks for joining. Thank you so much. Everyone. Take care, guys. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye. See you.
Bye.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining this live session. Hope you enjoyed it. Just as a reminder, our studio workshop, Reactive Miniverse with the leadership of Andrew and Hamze, will start on June 25. If you're interested, just check the link in our bio and save your spot as soon as possible. So till another day, another interview. See you soon. Bye.